personal mode, which is do not disturb, other phone, do not disturb. Okay. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky. We are making strength and conditioning not boring anymore, and we do this by highlighting the practitioners that make this the best field to work in athletics. Today, we are joined by Mark McLaughlin. Mark, thank you for joining the show, allowing me to learn from you, our listeners. There's a lot of other things you could be doing, so again, thank you very much, my man.
Oh, yeah, Justin. Really appreciate it. Glad we could get together here.
Same. I kind of like to come out of the gate swinging. What is one of the most impressive athletic feats that you've ever seen working with athletes in the entirety of your career working in athletics?
Oh, man. That's a great. You are coming out of the box.
Coming out of the gate swinging. Like, let's just go. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So I worked with an athlete. His name was Colt Laerla. And this is probably, I think it's been 11 or 12 years ago. Colt was going to be a senior, 6'5", 240. He went to combine. He was a football player, and he did standing long jump in his Chuck Taylors without any warm up. He jumped 10.8, and then he proceeded to go to the vertical jump, and I think jumped 38 or 39. And so, 10.8, that's phenomenal. But to do it, like he did it, was just like, you're like, oh my God. And then, he went on to play at University of Oregon and, hands down one of the probably top 3 physically gifted athletes I've ever had the opportunity to work with.
So it's interesting you say that about the standing long jump, because you and I were talking off air about Harvard. And when I was there, the assistant director, Tim Mullen, his answer when we were talking to him, hey, what would be your test to kind of, see general athleticism if you could pick one? And he said the broad jump, because he's like, I don't think I've ever seen somebody that does a good broad jump that's not a good athlete, because it's a good expression of power, your ability to land low on it. And I keep saying all of this because I remember Tristan Wirfs, the offensive lineman from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the guy, he just signed that big contract.
Yeah.
So when I was at Iowa, he came in as a freshman, and I remember him doing his standing broad jump at 325, a true freshman in the summer, June. Dude goes and jumps 9 feet. And I was just like, he has no idea what he's doing. And he weighs 325 pounds and just jumped 9 feet. That's insane. And then he goes on and does a 10.6 at the combine, and the rest is history. But it's the importance of a broad jump is a great measure of athleticism.
Yeah, and the other test that I've been using for a long time is actually the triple broad jump.
Yep.
So
3 in a row, not left, right, double.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So three two-legged triple jumps in a row. And Al Vermeil, he published his training guide, and that was one of the tests that he used. And he actually had, norms for 12 to 18-year-olds.
Really?
It's 22 to 28 feet. And so I've been using that now for, God, I don't know, 20 plus years. So that's another good one, because then you get to see, there's the power expression, but then, okay, how do they coordinate, 3 jumps in a row? And then also you can replicate it very easily. You don't need any special equipment other than a tape measure, and, you just go.
It's interesting you say that about I didn't know that from Al, but the 3-rep broad jump, Nick DeMarco and I were colleagues at Iowa. He's now the director of sports performance at Elon.
I know the name.
Yep. So Nick and I worked together for 3 or 4 years. We were neighbors at Iowa. Anyways, he had told me about what they'll do is they'll do a 3-rep broad jump, but divide it by 3 to get a number. And then they'll compare that number to a standing broad jump to be able to see if there's a difference in dynamic strength with respect to horizontal jumping instead of, because everybody does it vertically. Right. But I had heard that, and I was like, okay, that's a really good idea. Let's kind of see how athletes are able to elastically store energy, when they're going horizontally. And also another story about DeMarco, when we worked together, talking about doing things cold. I've literally watched him squat 500 pounds, and his warm up was put knee sleeves on and tie his shoes. Like that, there was,
Right.
it was. I was like, that's insane. Like 500 pounds,
Right.
cold, like legitimately got up from his chair, put on his Olympic lifters, and squatted 500 pounds cold. Like that was insane.
Right, right. And now I'm 60 and getting up out of the chair cold is hard, you
Yeah,
know.
you're
So
you're using your hands like
right, right.
So for Al's stuff, like anybody that's listening to this, they're going to be like, okay, cool. Is there a place that they can find it? Have you
God,
do you have a chart that you have where it's like, hey, with respect to Al Vermeil, like giving credit back to it, or like, cause I'm sure some coaches are going to want to get their eyes on that.
yeah, so what I'll do, Justin, is I'll see if I can find the file because I know I have it, and I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Because he had done a book, and it was, I think, based on a lot of his work that he had done with the Bulls, that he had done with, Charlie Francis, and, I originally heard about it from Buddy Morris back in like 2005, 2006, and so I'll pull it up and send it to you.
You just said the name Charlie Francis, and the thing that I wrote down here was a tweet or an X. I don't know what it's called anymore, but
Hmm.
the former owner of Strength Coach Network, Keir Wenham Flatt, the founder, he put something out the other day where he said it's kind of comical that people don't consider when it was like, Gatlin, Usain, Asafa Powell. Geez, I have the rest of the names written down, but like that final when it was,
Yeah.
almost 8 out of the 9 had popped positive. And he's like, it's kind of comical that people don't call that like the steroid era of sprinting or the dirty era in the same respect that baseball is. I don't know really where I was going with that question because it's like you still have to do amazing things and train these athletes, whether they're having the doping or the other substances. I guess my question is, are we ever going to see some of these times get touched again? Because you just see the Olympics that happened, and nobody that won that 100-meter would have been anywhere close in that final.
Right. I mean, yeah, that's a great question. And again, I mean, speaking at, the highest level of sport, it's, just because I don't work in that field, but, the observations, I would be like, something I think in the future, someone could pop, a certain time or whatever. But, is it going to be from, holistic training versus, assisted training? And I just don't know if the human can reach some of those times unless the coach is like, exceptional. And kind of, I think, Randy Huntington, I think, is one example of somebody where, his work with Su Binyin from China and just kind of how he went about it, I think is one of the few exceptions of somebody at the highest level being able to do on a natural state and run, I think Sue ran 9.83.
Jeez, that's so fast.
Fastest 60 split ever at like 6.29. And when you understand the culture of, some of the Chinese athletes and what Randy's had to say about it, it's like, okay, like that was a legit time. But then everybody else, how they work, it's just hard to say.
One of the things that I had Joseph Johnson on the show, and we were talking about sprinting, and I said, is the USA not able to compete? Obviously, is able to win a gold this year, but not winning gold, not performing as well because athletes essentially get plucked from track. Like, oh, you run a really fast time in high school, they want you to go and play football, and there is big money to be made nowadays in college football. Like,
Oh
do
yeah.
you think that's part of the reason why athletes are not, sprinting wasn't as major for the U.S. on the grand national stage?
I think that's part of it. I think culturally, like if you look at a lot of the European countries and those guys that are good at track and field, they don't have, pro football or baseball or basketball like we do, or a college system that now pays. I think track and field sport is kind of ingrained in that culture of being, something like a worthwhile goal to, work towards, and then also soccer. And in the U.S., yeah, like, and I read Steve Magnus's stuff about trying to make.
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr has been my online software platform choice since 2019. Been using it at Towson, using it at Goldfinch, and use it with my online remote clients. You can learn more about them in the link down below. TeamBuildr is also part owner in the Plyomat, which will allow you to get quick, valid, and reliable jump data, jump height, ground contact time, and reactive strength index in just seconds. They are part owner of Plyomat, so you can check them out in the link down below as well.
Track and field more appealing to the viewer here in the U.S. And so I think maybe as time goes on, if, they can figure out a production value, I think what Michael
Yeah.
Johnson is doing, I think, that could be like a really great thing to spur the attention of, track and field. Because like when you see Simone Biles on gymnastics, like, I think for the next probably 10, 20 years, U.S. gymnastics for the women will just go through the roof because everybody wants to try to be like her. So, I think sociocultural like really plays a big part in these things kind of organically growing.
How much do you see that working with, like your youth population and hearing conversations with parents, like, because you've been doing it for a longer period of time? How often is that conversation had?
Yeah, so like I'm working a 5th through 8th grade girls basketball camp right now, and there's like 25 girls, and kind of the theme of the camp is the Olympics. And so yesterday, I have them for a half an hour a day, and so yesterday I said, hey, how you girls like the Olympics? They love it. And I said, who's your favorite? And every one of them said Simone Biles. And so I think these kind of iconic athletes, when they're on the world stage, can drive, a lot of that, like U.S. swimming with Michael Phelps and the people that followed him. And so I think if track and field gets more of those athletes, I think that can only, help grow the sport at the younger levels.
Because as somebody that, kind of lives under the rock with respect to other things like that, again, if there's not the revenue sense of it, I mean, it almost seems like parents are not going to want to put their kid in that event because they want the potential, earning power for their child and set them up for the best that's for them, right?
Yeah, and then you watch how they train at those young ages, and parents like, I've seen some, some speed camps with like 12-year-olds more geared towards track and field, and you have, these coaches putting 10 and 11-year-olds in spikes. You have them running repeat 200s with like 2 or 3 minute rest periods, and it's like, and I've visually seen it, and it's like, okay, like you're just destroying the love of, anything with these kids because you're professionalizing it at such a young age. So I think if like our coaches and PE had a better understanding of like how kids learn and like let them just try out as many events as possible, I think that it would grow at a much, better rate. But, it's such a money grab on certain sports at the young ages that we just like waste so much talent.
Yeah, like the baby Gronk thing. And I had somebody message me one time and saying like, hey, my kid is slow with their max velocity and he's 7 years old. What should I do? I was like,
Right.
should stop testing their max velocity and let
Right.
them go play on a playground.
Yeah, and that's what everybody thinks that, oh, I got to get a trainer so they can get better, but if they actually just let them do stuff on their own, they would get better. When you look at the average time that kids sprint on a playground during school, I think it's like 3 seconds, and they're just playing organically.
Yep.
Yet when they get into these professional training environments, they just flip, naturally what these kids are doing, and that's where you get burnout. That's where you get all these overuse injuries at, these young ages. And it's just like, we just don't understand how to bring them forward in a caring way.
So talking X's and O's now, what is some of the basic guiding principles of your programs with respect to everything that we just said, trying to not burn them out, trying to train them properly? What are some, big rock things that you believe in and use as your principles for program?
Yeah, so here at the high school, so the ages I work with, I actually get seventh and eighth graders from the junior high,
Okay.
and
Yep.
then obviously ninth through, senior. And so one of the things that's a big part of our program is gymnastics. So I took the wrestling room, and we have parallel bars, we have rings, we have pommel horse, we have a bunch of mats to, tumble on. And so I let the kids for 15 to 20 minutes a day go upstairs and just have fun and just be tumbling around. They can wrestle, they can do, cartwheels, flips, back flips. So that's a big part of it because it gives them the autonomy to, I'm up there as a safety guide, but it's them doing what they want to do. And so they get to move through space, which, sport is. They get coordination, agility, speed, strength, all this, and it's fun for them. And so then they want to come back tomorrow. So that's my goal. Like, I want it to be such a great 5-star experience that they come back tomorrow, then they come back the next day. And so then, I get them maybe 5 to 7 years, and that helps them grow and enjoy the process. And then as they get older, but I even do it with the older kids, then start getting into, more, loading, external loading, and, but, making it as, athlete driven as I possibly can make it. And then I ask them a bunch of questions on feedback on what they like and don't like. In fact, I do 2 big questionnaires for each team per year. And then a friend of mine who's a professor kind of looks at it, then we kind of go through it to find out what they liked and didn't like, so then I can do a better job each year. And then, that's kind of how I start.
Sticking with the survey question, because I know other coaches do the same thing, and we did it too, or I did it at Towson and at Iowa and Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you recommend taking input from others and trying to take it with a grain of salt of like, not, you don't want to just give them like, oh, my kids would eat candy and soda every day of the week, my children, but I can't
Mm-hmm.
just give them that. I have to give them what I know is good for them. So that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
where my question is. How do you respect their input, but not throw baby out with the bathwater, maybe?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. So, if I'm truly running an athlete-centered program, then I need that feedback, and I need to take it in such a way that is going to help the athlete and then myself. So, is it like some of the questions are, okay, like, how do you like my coaching style? Do you want a more, and I don't know, if the authoritarian, way? Do you want it more self-directed on your part? Do you want a combination? Do you like the gymnastics? Some kids just don't. So then, taking that input and then having my core philosophy over here, and then just being able to combine, take the feedback with what I want to do and try to make it a more,
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Hawkin Dynamics. I've had Hawkin Dynamics for multiple years, dating back to my time at Towson, and still utilize them here at Goldfinch when I'm training athletes in Iowa. Hawkin Dynamics makes it simple to be able to get input to find out what's going on underneath the hood with your athletes. Whether it's lower body assessment, upper body assessments, you want reliable data to find out how the athlete is putting force into the ground so you can be able to accurately return an athlete from an injury, and you can also find out how the athlete is producing force to check how your training is working. Check out Hawkin Dynamics in the link down below.
cohesive environment. Also knowing that it's organic and that, okay, some of these things that they're telling me to do, it's like, just like you said, we're just not going to, do that. And, some stuff works, other stuff doesn't. And then, I'm always going through, things in my mind after each day of what worked and didn't work, and should I change it? And okay, I'm gonna, let it go a little longer, and then, some things work themselves out, and other things it's like, okay, I am never doing that again. That was the biggest mistake I ever made, and we'll move on.
How about sport coaches? Whether it's getting input in the form of surveys, but like, how do you take their input and give them what they want with it still being what is best for the team and supporting the coach?
Yeah, so that's another great question. And so I've been here for 4 years, and like any good relationship, it just takes time. And I can remember when I first started and when the internet was first coming out, some coaches were like, okay, man, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to tell the head coach, like, this is how you do it, because this is what Berko Chansky or, Buddy Morris would do, or whoever. And it's like, well, you just can't do that, because you have to build that trust of the athlete first, then, also with the coach. And then, how does the coach work? How does he intake information? What does he want from the team? What's his culture? And then from there, you kind of start building, because I'm big on data. So like, if I'm going to go to somebody and kind of lay out my, like what I would like to see done, I need to have facts to kind of back that up on why it's a good idea or why it isn't. And then from there, with the head coach, just develop a relationship that allows this partnership. It's, you're working jointly together for the good of the team. And, you can put stuff forward to him that it makes sense. Other things, it's like he just doesn't get it, or, we're just not in that time and space for it to happen. And then, maybe you come back to it, 3 or 4 months down the road. But with what we do here, it is not separation. So I work very closely with our athletic trainer, with our coaching staff, and so it's a very cohesive, like we track injuries, for example, on every sport. So, okay, let's say we have high ankle sprains. Okay, so maybe I should change the training the next year to try to resolve that, or, try to mitigate that. How are they practicing? How long are practices? So, I just try to make it as a partnership and a collaboration.
How hard is it to do that with multiple different sport coaches then too? Because a lot of coaches are in the same boat where they might have to work with a lot of different head coaches.
Yeah, so it's some of them just don't want your input. So here at the school, like, they don't have to work with me. Like, it's optional. So right now I have 7 or 8 teams that I work with. And out of those 7 or 8, I would say like 3 or 4 of them, we kind of have that relationship. The other, 2 or 3, I'm just there to train their athletes. Like, they don't want any, input from me, which, on the, like, how to, run practices or whatever. And that's totally fine. And, if you're working with a lot of coaches, like, you just have to sometimes say, okay, that relationship for what I may want to do just is not going to work. And then, some of these coaches a lot of them are, I wouldn't say volunteers, but like a lot of our coaches here, like, don't even work on campus. Like, they have other jobs and other commitments. And so, you may only see them 2 months out of the year because the rest of the time they're working their other job. And I know a lot of people talk about continuing education with coaching staff, not necessarily with strength and conditioning, but let's say with, football skill or basketball skill. And it's like, shit, man, these guys, they just don't have the time. So then you kind of have to know your audience, right?
That's a really good point that I never thought about, depending on the high school and where you're at and the other constraints that they have. What is then the hardest part for you, the high school strength and conditioning coach, or like the average high school strength coach, like, speaking broad termly without obviously knowing every person's situation, but like, some top things?
Well, I would say, time. Like if you go through, Twitter, X, like that seems to be everybody's, or not everybody's, but the vast majority of people, it's time. I have 30 minutes in this class, or I have 45 minutes for, after school, and, I have 150 athletes I'm working with, or even 50 or 20, or my space is small. And we have, I have some of those, I have some of those constraints here as well. So, if it's a time thing, like logistically thinking about how you can use other parts, like whether it be the hallways, whether it be the wrestling room, whether it be, the dance studio, like trying to figure out other ways to create more space for yourself is number one. Like our motto here during the winter and spring is like, there's no bad weather, there's only bad clothing. So, we're, as much as we can be outside, we are outside because there's a ton of room. So that would be number one, like trying to figure out other ways to create physical space to do stuff. And then the second thing is trying to, do some type of testing to bucket athletes to where, if you have 50 kids, can you have, 10 guys or 12 or, however you split it up, so you can manage those groups easier based on whatever, whether it be the triple jump or the broad jump like we were talking about earlier. Whatever test you have, then you can, okay, I have these 5 groups, each group is going to have a different training, and, this is where they're going to be, and this is how I'm going to manage it and rotate them. Like an example, so right now with the football team, we have like 100 athletes, and I have 5 groups. I have the incoming freshmen, and then I have, the sophomores through seniors in 4 groups. And so all those groups, with the exception of the freshmen, like 1 through 4, are all split into based off of, their long jump, their vertical jump, some Kaiser testing. And so that's how I'm bucketing them. And so, then it becomes kind of, I wouldn't say easy to manage, but it's like, okay, I have those 4 groups. Here's the training they're doing. I can put some guys outside doing, say, hurdle jumps or skipping, or, we're going to do stadium bounds plus these other things. Okay, the freshmen are going to be up doing gymnastics to start with. So, your constraints can and should, I think, make you be more creative in your approach. That's part of the fun part for me, is the challenge of getting everybody trained with limited resources.
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Vitruve VBT. With Vitruve, you can accurately measure what speeds your athletes are moving the bar. No longer do you have to program simply based on sets and reps. You can program for your more mature athletes based on the velocities that they are hitting. You can accurately measure at a great price with Vitruve, and you can have this integrate with your TeamBuildr, making it simple so you no longer have to write down the recorded reps from other devices. Everything in one place with Vitruve VBT. Check them out in the link down below. How do you have that ability then to dive deep with, like, the athletic trainers for these injuries? Like, if you wanted to do return to play, as that height, like, you care and you want to do well and you want to do right by the kids, but if you're getting pulled in all those directions, how do you prioritize that and make it happen?
So like on the return to play, I forget what the app that we use, but so Dom has got it set up to where I get alerts with every athlete that comes through that, has an injury. And so I know, and like especially the upper class kids, like I have a bunch of Kaiser data on them. He's got his, injury reports. And so then I'm getting these updates, say in the morning on, 3 or 4 athletes, kind of what their status is until because they stay with him. And then once they are able to return to train, then I get a note from him. So then I kind of know 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time, because I've been flagged on what the injury is, on kind of what our standard, approach will be with that athlete. Um, and so I'm here 3 hours in the afternoon, but the 5 hours that I'm at home, I'm on the computer designing stuff, working through, how I'm going to manage these injuries or the training.
How about the small space piece? Are you guys able to like try to play the safety card? Like, hey, this can keep the athlete safer if it's a bigger space. Because I remember a friend of mine who works in the high school space. He's like, dude, day one, I had 120 athletes and it was me in the weight room. Like, sure, we got a brand new big space, but like, you can't see all of that. Like, if a kid does math wrong, he doesn't know how to add. If a kid hurts himself in the weight room, like they could really hurt himself.
Yeah, so, and that's a great question. So in the 4 years I've been here, we haven't had any weight room injuries, zero. I'm constantly on them. Like, I will stop a session, because I think yesterday we probably had, I'd say we had 60 kids in the weight room. And they're kind of funneling in and out. So that's the other thing with the small space. They may do a weightlifting, but then they're going outside to do all their jumping. And so I try to keep it moving, like it's, so everybody's moving versus 60 guys just, squatting. So I had, yesterday I had groups 1 and 2 on the Kaiser squat and leg press. That was probably 30 guys, 30, 40 guys. And then the other 20 were down below doing step ups and squat. And the space is so small that I can stand on top. And with the Kaiser, like, I don't have to be concerned about the safety. So then I can focus down on the floor where the guys are doing step ups or squats. So it's the way that I have it set up, and everybody looks out for themselves. I mean, for their partner. Plus we have, the safety thing set up. And then, the weights that we're lifting right now, Justin, like, nobody is in a spot where bad things are going to happen. Like, I don't have even my sophomores or juniors squatting anything heavier than, 225, to 250, just because they're not strong enough to do it. So, just organically and everything, that's how I've set the safety piece up for it.
How about nutrition? Like, how do you best optimize nutrition for high school athletes with respect to the weight room?
Yeah, so I'm not a nutritionist, and so I took a class from my friend Landon Evans. Landon's a RN, and so I took an hour seminar, 2-hour seminar from him a couple years ago, and then he gave me a bunch of handouts and everything. And like he said, nutrition, like anything, needs to be coached. And so I have stuff that is up. Oh, here, I'll take the phone over here because I have it posted in like multiple areas throughout the facility so they can see it. So I don't know. Can you see that?
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yep.
Okay, so I have that posted in like, I don't know, there's like 9 or 10 areas within the weight room, within, where they have meetings, the locker room. And so it's just constant. And I have a Instagram chat set up for each group. And so throughout the year, I'll be sending out, those handouts. I'll send out, recipes, like, last year or this last summer, I did a, 30-minute basically live chat with, give me your favorite food. Okay, I'll send you a recipe because I love to cook. So, so getting them interactive within the nutrition piece. And then, they'll be doing the warm up and I'll say, okay, big day tomorrow, make sure that you get, your pre-workout meal, or make sure to eat a lot of carbs tonight. Are you getting protein? And, guys are coming in saying, hey, I can't put on weight. Okay, like, let's go through your food. Are you eating enough? I'm trying. and it's just like anything. Like it just needs to be coached and talked about, and have the ability for them to come to you with any questions. And then with me, it's like I don't obviously know I don't know a lot about nutrition, but I know enough. And it's like if I don't know it, I'll ask somebody. I'll ask Landon. You know, so that's kind of, and then I make sure the coaches in their meetings and stuff try to bring it up as well.
Keeping your certification is essential to staying hired as a strength and conditioning coach. Both of our long form courses, Fundamentals 1 and Fundamentals 2, offer CEUs to the NSCA, the NCSF, as well as the ASCA professional development points. Click the link down below to learn more about our education courses, which are both over 20 hours long and allow you to learn from some of the best practitioners in the field of strength and conditioning. How do other strength coaches that want to get into high school, how do they go about that? Like, how do you navigate that water?
Yeah, so my situation was kind of unique. So from 2003 to 2016, I had my own training facility, and so I trained a lot of local high school athletes. And this kind of comes to, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So one of the kids that I trained was Stevie Corey. Well, his dad Steve is the head coach here, uh, and I was fortunate. Stevie was a phenomenal athlete, and I think he was running like a 4.56 when I got him. Well, I have him for a year, and then he goes down to Oregon State and then runs like a 4.39 laser as a walk-on, and the only person faster than him is Brandon Cooks. And so, his dad, like, okay, I've seen what this guy has done. And so, Steve came to me after I left Omega Wave and said, hey, do you want to, come, work for us? And so I started just with the football team, and then a weight room monitor position opened up here. So I took that, and, I've just kind of made this job into what I'm doing. I just kind of made it myself. And the high school administration is like, has been so good to me, and, made things work. And so, I work 15 hours a week here, and, I absolutely, love it. So, navigating it, like, I think there's only like 3 or 4 positions like myself that the state of Oregon, like other high schools, have. I'm sure like Texas and some of these other big like football states probably have a more opportunities, but I think it's if you want a way to figure it out, like you'll do what you need to make it work. Maybe it's
Agreed.
volunteering.
Yeah. It's almost interning in the non-classical sense. Like if you intern at the college sector, you're interning and working for free for a coach. It's like, hey, you got to do it, but you have to navigate it a little bit differently. Where you're instead of interning for a head strength coach at college, you're interning for the administration at the high school that you want to work at.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of soft skills that I think well, I mean, all people, it doesn't matter what job you're doing. Like, there's just some soft skills that you have to understand how to do. Like, you have to be able to work with people. You have to, understand that just because you think that you know it all, like, and if you want a job, like, you have to take a step back and say, what am I, if this is my true passion, what am I willing to do to get there? Because when I started my training facility, I volunteered for 3 years at my high school while I was doing my other job, just so I could see if this is what I wanted to do and could I do it. So I think if you want to do something, you'll figure out a way to get it done.
You brought up the private sector, and that was going to be the next question that I asked you about is because you had your foot in that door, does that help you relate with any athletes that do go to a private sector? Because I feel like there's a beef or turf war over, high school athletes going and training at a private sector instead of at what they're at. Like, what do you recommend to handle that?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I had that. So when I worked at the private facility, people were paying me to make them better, right? The parents were coming, they were seeking me out because they felt that I offered a service that could make their son or daughter a better athlete. But I told them straight up, it's like, okay, if you're doing your school training plus mine, plus, whatever stuff you're having them do, like, it's not going to work. Like, you need to come here and have total buy-in. Otherwise, it's, you're not going to get the results that you want. And I fired athletes and parents because of that. Because my reputation and what, the business was set up to do was not about just training people for the sake of training them. And so, that worked out well. And, I think that's why we had so much success with the athletes there. It's because it kind of self-selected itself. Like, you were going to work hard. You were there for a purpose. It wasn't some, instant gratification, 3-week speed week type thing. So now that it's a flip side and I'm at the high school and these kids now are going to outside trainers, it's like, okay, you can do one or the other, but you're not going to do both. And if you get injured here because of extra work or anything that you're doing, that responsibility is on you. And because I see what they post on social media, because it's, a lot of them post it, and it's like, okay, how you're training is a waste of your time. You're just not going to get any better. So that's how I handle it. I have the full support of, the head coach on that. And then, again, sometimes kids just want to do what they want to do, and their parents want them to do that. And it's like, okay, that's fine.
That's fair. It's interesting that you have that perspective because I don't know if I would actually be able to have that. Like that's a very, it's a good way to think about it. Like I need to have that way.
Yeah, and again, like it's, I think, and that's why I like doing these talks, and that's why I like listening to other, coaches' talks. So I can learn from them. I have that perspective because of how, how I kind of started. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. That's just kind of how I, dealt with it. And, other coaches, may have, other ideas about that, which is, fine. But, my thing is like, I see the injuries, not within our program, but with some of these kids and what's happening. And a large part of it is because of, just the amount of volume they do in, say, training, but then also just how much they play. And, that's just like, that's why I got into this business, because I had no injuries growing up. None of my friends did. I read about this girl that was a cross-country runner who broke her femur in the final 200 meters of a cross-country track meet or cross-country meet, and it's like, okay, that's just weird. So that's what sparked my interest in training young athletes.
Yeah, I mean, our goal is to keep them on the field. Like that's period.
Yeah.
I was texting with a coach where he's like, "Hey, I was talking with somebody and they were surprised that all I cared about was like sprint and jump metrics." I was like, "Well, I really only care about their player health. Like, are they available to play? And then if they do get hurt, how long does it take for them to get back? Like, that's what I really care about."
Yeah, and sports should be fun for the kids, and it's for the kids. Like, I constantly have to remind myself of that. Like, this is for them. This is for them. And, to put them in spots where, like, I want them 10, 15, 20 years down the road to remember what the experience was like here, and that they have a joy to be moving. Like, they want to go on hikes when they're older. They want to ride their bike. They want to try new stuff. Like we had a down week last week, and the kids were, sending me pictures of, this hike some of them went on. It was like 13 miles a day where they were, hiking. And it's like, okay, man, like that to me is like, that makes me feel so good that they want to go out and do stuff like that.
I
Because,
actually used
you
to
know,
say that at Towson. I was like, I hope this is the best part of your day. Like this should be
yeah,
essentially PE, even though at the college level. Like this should be physical activity in the off season too. Like this is PE class. You should have fun. That doesn't mean everything's going to be easy and it's rainbows and sunshine. No, like we're going to lift heavy and sprint hard and do hard conditioning, but it's fun to do those things with your teammates when you're in an environment that is difficult, challenging, but just right outside of your difficulty level. And that's how it's supposed to be.
yeah,
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Sleep Me. Sleep Me are the makers of the Chili Pad, which has been my bed cooling device since 2020. Chili Pad will allow you to sleep and not wake up hot anymore. This was something that I had to worry about. I used to have the air conditioning down way too low. Now, I don't have to have the air conditioning as low because my Chili Pad, my Dock Pro, keeps my bed cold at night. Check out Sleep Me, check out the Chili Pad, check out the Dock Pro in the link down below.
yeah. I mean, that's how we've survived as a species, right? Like, you know, it's not hiding all the time from stuff. It's, you know, sprinting away from something that's trying to eat you, and then, you know, figuring out all these solutions to it. So I think that's the other thing. I think a lot of times, at least on the physical training side with young athletes, like I think people, A, don't understand how to do it, but B, like these kids want a challenge.
Yes.
They want to be challenged. So yes, it's fun, the gymnastics and stuff, but then, you know, the training as they get older, it'll get harder, and they're ready for it. They want it.
And that's the thing, like you should challenge them. And any of our listeners out there, like you can't just make everything super easy for them. Yeah, you can be the guy that they come to and they talk, but like give them the challenge because, you know, we all like that as human beings, like to be able to push yourself through where you thought you had a certain upper limit and then be able to go past that.
Yeah, and that's how they learn. And, you know, my thing, like, is they need to own those challenges on their own. They need to want to do them.
Own
And
their
that's why,
decisions
like,
too.
yeah, yeah. And, you know, and especially with young kids, like, you know, I'll get somebody at 14 and, you know, their personality when I first meet them at 14 and when they leave as a senior, like you go through these huge changes, both obviously from a physical standpoint, but also from a psychological standpoint. I mean, when I had my own training facility, I would start with a kid who was 12 years old. You know, we're talking about, you know, our favorite cereals. And then, you know, 9 years later, I'm buying him a beer. Um, and so, you know, I think we lose sight that sometimes, like, I mean, they're just young kids who, you know, need to learn, and we need to give them the opportunities to learn, not just tell them what to do.
What would be your biggest take home message to any strength coach, regardless of age, regardless of where they work with? Like, what would be your biggest message, thing that you want them to take away from listening to you talk right now?
Um, I would say the one thing that I think listening more, I think being a better observer of people and, you know, challenging yourself to let things be messy at times.
Mm.
Because, and I hear it with all teams, you know, we lack leadership. You know, kids aren't being assertive enough. Um, you know, what's the deal with this kid? And so I think, okay, are we giving them the opportunities to learn how to be a leader? And by learning to be a leader, you have to fail, and you have to fail a lot. And you can be a great leader and still fail, but you have to give them these opportunities. And there's little things like, okay, Wednesday, I want you guys to write your workout. You guys write it. You're total control of it. You work together to write it. I'm just here as a safety guide. Okay, you know, we're going to play a game as a warm-up. You guys decide the rules. Because and you hear it, man, people bitch and complain all the time. Kids don't have a lot of free play, blah, blah, blah. Okay, maybe that's true, but if you have them in a setting at school, why not give them a free play opportunity? Why do you, as the coach, always have to, be this authoritarian figure to dictate everything? Because then you're always complaining about what they don't do well, yet we're not giving them opportunities to practice that. So that's the one thing. It's like, just sit back sometimes and just observe. Because I think like Charlie Francis and his ability to understand body language with like Ben Johnson and those guys, that was one of his many superpowers. And I learned that in '04. And so then I have just observed people, how they walk, how they come into the weight room when they're on a good day, when they're on a bad day. What are some tip-offs to me that, could lead me to ask them more questions? And the only way that you do that is to observe, to ask questions, and then let them talk to you. So that's what I see.
Anybody that was listening to that, they're like, well, how do you navigate the fact of like, oh, well, if you're supposed to be the coach and you're in charge, but you're letting them choose, and you're like, well, what's the point of you being there other than safety? Like, anybody can make them safe. Like, you're supposed to be programming them things to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I do that. I just posted our workout that I wrote on X today that some of the kids did yesterday. So again, it's that balancing act of autonomy, direction from me, self-directed from them. Okay, me making a correction. Okay, them coming to me and asking me questions, me answering them sometimes, or okay, how would you solve this? That's why coaching is not this, passive thing all the time where I always have to be talking. And like if I'm observing somebody, for example, doing a squat, and so I'm one coach, and this comes back to like navigating the space and say, you're only one coach for 120 kids. Well, how about their peers coaching them? How about their peers who know how to squat fairly well? Okay, watch them. And so this is something I do in the early season, like, okay, here are the kind of the things we're looking for. You guys videotape them. You guys watch them together. And then you guys make the corrections on each other, because that's how you learn. So now I have kids who are like, their squat form is good, and they can go to their peer and say, okay, after I watched you, this is what I would do. And it's great. A, it frees me up, but B, it gives them this confidence of, oh man, I can coach and teach myself. And that's a great way to learn as well. So I think there's so many, other ways to solve some of these issues with space and time and lack of coaching that, you just have to kind of think outside the box and then understand that it's going against probably a lot of what you've done in the past. And are you comfortable with, that part of it?
How about use of other sport coaches? Because the same guy that I talked about before, where he had 100 guys in one room, guys and girls, he was able to utilize like the track coach to help out during winter or summer sprint work and things of that nature.
Yeah, so I don't use our track coach at all, because they're just horrible. And I think there's like some of this stuff, if they're in there for safety, like that's fine.
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Powerlift. Powerlift is located here in Iowa in the United States of America. I've utilized them back in 2011 when I had them at Harvard. I also had them at the University of Maryland, and then finally when I was at the University of Iowa. Their equipment is strong, it is durable, it is dependable. It's also customizable based upon whatever your needs are at your school. Check out Powerlift at the link down below.
And I have some of our coaches do our sprint stuff for the freshmen, but I've written it out like, okay, here are going to be the rest periods and everything, and basically you're just keeping time. Um, so unless I've trained somebody on kind of the basics and our philosophy on that stuff, then I just don't want them doing much on the correction side. And that's just me personally on just kind of how I view things,
No,
if
that
that
makes a
makes
ton of
sense.
sense. Yeah, no, that does. Like, and because I was wondering kind of the same thing when he said he did that. I was like, wonder how well that would work out. And yeah, you have extra eyeballs, but is that better? Is that worse?
Right, right. And I mean, some of these, and I'm not talking about every coach, but a lot of these guys, especially on the physical preparation side, like they're just old school. Like they don't understand rest periods and like, yesterday in between complexes, we had like 4 minutes of rest. And it's like, I mean, people just can't, they just have a hard time grasping, these basic things and the why of it. And I don't have time to explain to a bunch of coaches all the time why we're doing that.
How do you appreciate and work with those coaches that are so old school? Because I've heard that a lot with even late like, oh, I'm super old school and you're too new school. It's like, not really. Like it's actually pretty similar.
Yeah, so I, for the old school coaches, part of it is, education and, just kind of giving them the basics of, okay, do you guys watch your sport? And we'll take football, for example. Okay. How long, because this is what baffles me. Like, do you guys watch film? Yeah. Okay. How long do the plays last? I don't know, 3 to 5 seconds. Okay. What's the rest period? 30 to 40 seconds. Okay. So why would you run like a gasser? Why would you run 110s? Like the representation to the game itself, common sense says it's not even close. So then, like, you have to then, if this is what you want to do, like, you have to, boil it down in simple terms. And then if they still don't want to do it, or, they're in charge of conditioning and they want to do that, it's like, all right, like, I can't, I can only do, so much. And, I can bring out all my examples. I can bring out who I've trained, how I've trained them. They don't care. I mean, they just don't care. So it's like, all right, I've explained it to you. You don't want to do it, and we'll move on.
That's a very good place to be. How do you recommend our listeners get to that spot too, so they can have the same ability to connect and just kind of let it go?
Oh, man, I I think a lot of it is when I first started, I didn't let it go. I mean, it was just like, you're just sitting there, you're pissed, and but then it's like you get to the point where it's like, okay, like, some people just aren't going to get it, and you know, that's fine. And I think like with me, like I listen, like I have a lot of other interests that I like. So like I love music, cooking, um, and I just love to learn about how other people have excelled in their respective field. And so, picking up things on how people would communicate with people, how they solve problems, um, how you communicate, whether it be through, writing stuff down to people. Um, so, I think if you're coming from a good place and, people like you and want to work with you, then, maybe you'll have a better chance of, getting your point across because after all, you're there for the athlete. And if you kind of let people see that and demonstrate that in your actions, okay, then maybe, oh, okay, I kind of see what he's saying.
That's a
So,
pretty good. That's a pretty good spot to wrap it up for coaches because we've been talking
yeah.
for over an hour, and I want to respect your time.
Oh, yeah, man. No, this was a blast. I loved it.
Thank you very much for your time and helping educate me and our listeners. Have a great rest of your day, man. Well, I mean, you have a full day ahead of you because you're 2 hours behind me.
Right, right. Thanks a lot, Justin. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a great rest of the day, Mark.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.